Four children walked out of the Amazon alive after 40 days completely alone. The youngest was 11 months old. No phone signal, no food, no adults. And the strange part isn't that they survived, it's how. Because surviving this jungle isn't new. Humans have been doing it here for almost 13,000 years. Some are still doing it right now, in tribes that have never once spoken to the outside world. This is the real story of how and why some of them never stopped fighting to keep it that way. The Amazon covers over 5.5 million square kilometers, bigger than India and Pakistan combined. It produces roughly a fifth of the world's oxygen. It's also a place where modern tools quietly fail. Dense canopy blocks GPS signal in places. Search teams can walk past someone 20 feet away and never see them. This is the world those four children disappeared into in 2023. It's also the exact world the first humans walked into almost 13,000 years earlier. Here's something most people never learn. The word Amazon isn't indigenous at all. It's Greek, by way of one very bad day for a Spanish explorer. In 1542, Francisco de Orellana became the first European to travel the entire length of the river. Partway through, his expedition was attacked by a group of fierce female warriors local people called the Icamiabas, women without husbands. Orellana compared them to the legendary Amazons of ancient Greece, and the name stuck. To the women, the river, and eventually the entire rainforest. The most famous jungle on Earth is named after a fight a European explorer almost certainly lost. Now rewind almost 13,000 years. On a cliff wall in Colombia called Serranía La Lindosa, archaeologists found rock art painted in red ochre, showing giant sloths, mastodons, and people hunting among them. These weren't myths. These animals were alive at the time, and this is one of the very first human footholds in the entire Amazon basin, painted by people who had just finished one of the longest migrations in human history. They learned fast. Within generations, they domesticated cassava, a root crop so reliable it's still a staple survival food across the Amazon today, including for the four children who lived on it for 40 days in 2023. For most of the last century, the official story was simple. The Amazon was always untamed wilderness, too harsh, too dense for anything more than small, scattered hunter-gatherer groups. Explorers who claimed there were lost cities out there were laughed out of the room. That belief held for almost 100 years. It was wrong. In 2024, laser scanning revealed a network of cities buried under the Ecuadorian Amazon. Roads, plazas, and over 6,000 earthen platforms, home to thousands of farmers more than 2,000 years ago. The lead archaeologist had searched for 20 years before the scan finally showed him the whole picture. In his own words, it was a lost valley of cities. Around the same time, scientists in Bolivia mapped the Casarabe culture, pyramids, canals, and causeways connecting towns for miles. And in Brazil's Xingu region, researchers found spread-out garden cities that may have held thousands of people each. The Amazon wasn't empty, it was engineered. So where did all those people go? By the time anyone went looking, over 90% of them were already dead. Disease. When European explorers and colonists arrived, they brought smallpox, measles, and influenza, illnesses Amazonian immune systems had never encountered. Entire populations collapsed in a generation or two, long before most European eyes ever saw them. The untouched wilderness explorers described later wasn't natural. It was the aftermath of a collapse so severe it erased almost all visible trace of what came before. But it didn't erase everyone. Right now, more than 1 million indigenous people still live across the Amazon, in hundreds of distinct tribes and languages. The largest is the Yanomami, around 38,000 people across Brazil and Venezuela, in territory roughly twice the size of Switzerland. Their villages have no chiefs. Every decision is made by consensus after long, open debates where everyone gets a say. They live in enormous circular communal houses called shabonos, open-roofed structures that can hold up to 400 people in a single shared home. But size doesn't mean safety. Illegal gold miners have pushed into Yanomami land in recent years, poisoning rivers with mercury and bringing malaria, forcing Brazil to declare public health emergencies inside their own territory.
Now go to the opposite extreme. The Akuntsu, in Brazil's Rondônia state, are one of the smallest surviving tribes on the planet. In the 1980s, a new highway brought ranchers and loggers into their territory. Around 1990, gunmen massacred most of the tribe. When Brazil's Indigenous Affairs Agency finally made contact in 1995, only 7 Akuntsu were left. Since then, that number has only gone down. A tree fell and killed one of them in a storm. Old age took another. For years, there were as few as 4 left. And because tribal custom doesn't allow outsiders to marry in, every single Akuntsu death has brought their entire culture, language, and history closer to disappearing completely. Survival International put it plainly: a deliberate elimination of an entire people by ranchers hungry for land and wealth. And the Akuntsu weren't even the last. Nearby, in that same stretch of forest, a single man lived completely alone for 26 years. The very last survivor of his own tribe, after the rest were killed by loggers and miners decades earlier. He spent over 2 decades with no one to speak his language to, no one who remembered the same songs, no one left who knew who he really was. He was found dead in his hammock in 2022. He had decorated his own body with macaw feathers shortly before. Some who study his case believe he knew his death was close. No one ever learned his real name or the name of his people. With him, an entire human culture, one that may have existed for thousands of years, ended. Not every tribe waited to be found, and some never stopped defending their land the way their ancestors did. The Mashco-Piro, deep in Peru's Amazon, have stayed uncontacted by choice. In August 2024, after loggers pushed into their territory, the Mashco-Piro killed 2 of them with bow and arrow, one of the most recent confirmed killings by an uncontacted tribe anywhere on Earth. A conservationist filming nearby tribes in the same region once watched his own boat guide take a 7-foot arrow clean through the chest and somehow survive after being airlifted out. This isn't an ancient story. It's still happening. Which brings this all the way back to 4 children, alone in that same jungle in 2023. What saved them wasn't luck. It was knowledge, passed down generation after generation, all the way back to the very first people who painted hunting scenes on a cliff wall 13,000 years ago. The Amazon never asked anyone to prove they belonged there. It only ever asked them to remember how to stay alive in it.